we shall never, ever be apologetic for standing up for our rights.
It is not intelligent for 54 of us to go and sit before one gentleman from another place.
Central African Republic president is calling out the Western world, and this comes a few days after he had a meeting with the French president Macron.
African leaders are standing up for themselves and opposing the West. Do you know that France 24 has been banned from operating in Mali? Do you also know about the intellectual clash between the Congolese president and the president of France? Some daring African leaders have refused to be puppets to the West, even when threatened with sanctions, from a controversial anti-LGBTQ law in Uganda to a Namibian president forming stronger ties with the Chinese to spite the West. African leaders are standing up for themselves. Let's assess the 10 African leaders who have refused to be puppets of the West. William Ruto is the president of Kenya. He has spoken against the West's insistence for all 54 African countries to be represented in international summits. Ruto wants Africa to be represented by special envoys who attend summits to engage with Western leaders in a more practical and substantial manner, which will be more effective than the 54 representatives. Ruto believes that special envoys as African representatives during international summits will lead to more meaningful interventions and solutions to problems. The Kenyan president led by example by skipping the Russia-African summit, which was held in July 2023, instead opting to be represented by the African Union. William Ruto has also been vocal about the need for the West and international organizations to relate with Africa in equitable ways and to resort to constructive dialogues for the voice of Africa to be heard and held in high regard on the international stage. It's one thing to bring up suggestions. It's another thing for these suggestions to be implemented. Will international bodies like the UN implement President Ruto's recommendations? The South African MP and Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, has been one of Africa's most vocal political leaders. Naledi has spoken about her distaste towards the West's selective adherence to international laws. For example, unlike many other countries, the United States has refused to sign foundational international laws and treaties, such as the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and others. Naledi Pandor speaks against this double standard. Speaking in Ukraine, the South African diplomat stated that the US picks and chooses the rules that apply to them. In contrast, other countries, especially African countries, must comply with all international laws. She has been calling for a more leveled ground for all countries on the international stage, going on to voice out that the West called for the sovereignty of Ukraine to be preserved during the Ukraine invasion, yet didn't treat the Palestinian invasion with the same urgency. Pandor is an African leader with guts. Over the past decades, African countries have developed a cordial relationship with China. The West is ruffled about losing their stronghold on the African continent, and they have shown concerns about this. While speaking to the Namibian president, a German politician, Norbert Lammert, expressed his concerns about Chinese involvement in Namibia and Africa. Hage Geingob, the president of Namibia, told Mr. Lammert in essence that Africa could handle her affairs and the continent has every right to decide who she goes into international relations with.
I told Chinese ambassador, I'm not your puppet. It was impressed everywhere.
H. Genob also went on to say that Germany should mind their own business. The president of Namibia has been one of the African presidents who have welcomed China with open arms. He has stated that, unlike the West, China does not impose its culture and moralistic standards on the African continent, and the Asian country is a better option to partner with for the development of Africa than the West. G. Gob has also said that there is a need for the West to stop dictating Africa's alliances. Is H. Genob right? Felix Tshisekedi, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, publicly shut down the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, during a joint press conference held in Kinshasa, Congo in March 2023. Tshisekedi demanded that Africans be respected and their views be heard. He further stated that it is time for the West to abandon its imperialist attitude towards Africa and treat African countries respectfully, knowing that every country should be treated equally. Since his ascension to the presidency in 2019, Tshisekedi has advocated for a different approach to France's relations with Congo. He believes it is time for France to treat Congo with respect, knowing fully well that there are relations between both countries, not just Congo. Tshisekedi has proven that he is an African leader who will not blindly dance to the drum of the West. He has the well-being of every Congolese at heart, and his relations with Western countries will benefit his country and the whole of Africa. Is this enough to develop Congo? Gaddafi was the leader of Libya from 1969 until his assassination in 2011. Gaddafi's rulership was controversial because he was a dictator who refused to hand over power after over 40 years as the president of Libya. But Muammar Gaddafi was not a puppet of the West. He was a Pan-Africanist who loved his country and Africa as a whole.
وأنا أراه معمر القذافي قائد أممي أنا دافع عني ملايين.
He was firm in controlling the excessive manipulation of Western culture and influence in Libya. Gaddafi was also a known advocate against imperialism, which refers to the practice where powerful countries extend their power and dominion over other countries through territorial acquisition or by controlling the economic or political framework of the weaker nation. Rebels assassinated Gaddafi after protests erupted in Libya against his rule. Some theories circulated that his assassination was influenced by the West for Europe and America to gain more control over the oil in Libya.
Today, the government of Libya announced the death of Muammar Gaddafi.
Did Western manipulation influence Gaddafi's death? He is credited for coining the word neocolonialism. He was a charismatic leader and an exemplary statesman. He was the first president of Ghana. One of the concerns of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was the new wave of colonialism he feared would happen to Africans after independence. He spoke extensively about this and published a book in 1965 which covers it. In his book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, Nkrumah states, where neocolonialism exists, the power exercising control is often the state which formally rule the territory in question. Often called a prophet, Kwame Nkrumah foresaw the influence and control the West would yield over African countries even after independence. One of his significant pursuits as the leader of Ghana was to create a united Africa. He believed that an Africa that was wholly sovereign and independent was possible. Nkrumah believed Africans needed nothing from the West to develop the continent. Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966 and he died 6 years later. Is Pan-Africanism still a possibility today? Sankara was a revolutionary leader and former Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, with very strong views against the West. Captain Thomas Sankara led Burkina Faso for 4 years, and his contribution to Burkina Faso and Africa cannot be erased. Sankara believed that Africans could govern themselves, and he was passionate and vocal about freeing Africa from the influence of the West. Sankara believed that Africa could develop and thrive without Western aid, and was working hard to materialize the vision of a self-sufficient Burkina Faso before he was murdered in 1987. Thomas Sankara was focused on local production in Burkina Faso, and the country was thriving. One of Sankara's most controversial views was calling out other African leaders to refuse the payment of debt they owe the West. He stated, "Why should the exploited pay the exploiter?" Unfortunately, Blaise Compaoré murdered Sankara, and Compaoré undid many of the reforms of Sankara. Colonel Assimi Goïta has been the interim president of Mali since 28 May 2021. He ascended to the presidential office after the 2021 Malian coup d'etat, which overthrew the president, Ba Inda. Goïta has strongly opposed the influence of France in Mali and has made some policies to limit the activity of the European country in Mali. All non-governmental organizations in Mali which receive funding from France have been banned from operating. Even those engaged in humanitarian work have not been left out. French media outlets operating in Mali, such as France 24 and others, have been stopped from working in the country. Goïta cited biased reporting for these measures against the French media. As if these are not enough, French troops stationed in Mali for nearly a decade to help address terrorism challenges have been deported because, according to the Malian president, there have been limited progress in addressing the issue of terrorism in Mali. These are very drastic measures. Do you think Goïta is going too far? The loudest voice against neocolonialism and external manipulation in modern times is from the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame. In several speeches, Mr. Kagame calls out the West manipulation of the African continent. In his famous speech that addresses the politics in the BBC, Kagame spoke about how the Western media belittles Africans.
Well, BBC is supposed to be, the standard of freedom of speech.
He stated that Africans are not people to be looked down on, and that Africans have rights that should be respected.
They belittle people. They are not people to be belittled at all. They are no better than anybody. God created us equal.
Mr. Kagame explained that everyone was created equal. The Rwandan president has also been greatly criticized by the West, specifically the United Nations. In 2012, the UN accused Rwanda of deploying a high network of Rwandan army officials to support the rebel group M23, who fought in eastern DRC. In turn, the US government withheld 240 million Rwandan franc, equivalent to $200,000, to stop Rwanda's operations in Congo, but all of these were ignored. Paul Kagame has been seen in several videos speaking against the West and their manipulative schemes. If a developmental revolution happens in Africa, Paul Kagame will lead that revolution. Before I review number 1, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more relevant African-related updates. Also, please turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos I upload. The 9th president of Uganda, in May 2023, signed an anti-LGBTQ bill into law, going against one of the most upheld rights in the Western world today. The headline by CNN reporter David Mackenzie described the bill as one of the world's harshest anti-LGBTQ laws. The Reuters, another Western media outlet, in reporting the passage of the bill, also describes the law as harsh. The United States government had already stated that they were deeply troubled by the bill. Before the passage of the anti-LGBTQ law, Uganda received a lot of pressure and criticism from the United States and the UN. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, asked President Museveni not to sign the bill into law. Turk informed Museveni that signing the bill into law would affect the Ugandan society. The United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken has also said that the law will damage Uganda's reputation as a destination for tourism, investment and development. The law, which includes the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, is in full effect in Uganda.
Do you personally dislike homosexuals?
Of course, they are disgusting. What sort of people are they? How can you go? I never knew what they were doing. That's how I've been told recently that what they do is terrible.
Whether you agree with Museveni or not, his firm stance to resist Western interference is laudable. But has he gone too far in his bid to oppose the West? Let me know what you think in the comment section. African leaders are not respected because they speak against discrimination and interference, yet they beg for foreign aid from the same Western countries. On one hand, African leaders refuse to be puppets of the West. On the other, they run the Western countries and institutions for bailouts and to seek financial support for projects in the African continent. In the Africa Beyond Aid speech given by President Akufo-Addo of Ghana at the International Educators Summit in Dakar, he explained that Africa cannot continue to make policies based on the support it receives from the Western world. Celebrated musician Rihanna said President Akufo-Addo's speech was inspiring and that Ghanaians should be proud. Yet in May 2023, the IMF approved a 34 billion Ghana cedis bailout for Ghana, equivalent to $3 billion. The bailout was to help the African country in its economic crisis. The same president who heralded the Africa Beyond Aid message approved the decision to go to the IMF. Will Africa ever be free of foreign aid?